I know you've got an ear out for the start of the podcast, but before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to remind you to keep an eye out for Darryl Lee's limited edition Christmas treats, because they're in stores now. Like the iconic Christmas nougat pudding, so yummy and a gorgeous little gift. And some delicious Chrissy-themed twists on your favourite treats, like the Darryl Lee Rockley Road with chewy red and green jelly pieces, green and red crunchy milk chocolate balls, my favourites, and green apple and strawberry flavoured licorice. Watch them disappear. Your Christmas treats table will pop with colour and scrumptiousness. Spread some joy, bring the fun, and enjoy the Christmas tradition that is Darryl Lee. Hurry before they sell out. Darryl Lee makes Christmas better. Welcome to The Five of My Life with me, Nigel Marsh. As an author, adman and theologian, I've always been interested in people's stories. Not just those with a high profile, but people from all walks of life, regardless of fame. Which is why I created this show. Each guest who takes the 5 of My Life challenge chooses a favourite film, book, song, place and possession. They tell me their choices in advance so I can research them, but they don't tell me why they've chosen them. That's the subject of our conversation. It's amazing what you can learn when discussing someone's 5 choices. I hope you enjoy listening to the show as much as I enjoy making it. Naomi Mourra describes herself as Australia's only Lebanese, lesbian, ex-Jehovah's Witness stand-up comedian. As you would expect with a life experience as varied and unique as that, her response to the 5 of My Life challenge was fascinating, deeply shocking, but ultimately uplifting. Hey Naomi, welcome to 5 of My Life.
Oh, thanks for having me, Nigel. It's so exciting.
I've always wanted to interview Australia's only Lebanese, lesbian, ex-Jehovah Witness stand-up comic. Is it true you're the only one?
I have not yet been taken to task for using that, so I am assuming yes. I welcome another one to join me, I have to say. I mean, it's a lonely, lonely place.
I've never met one with that full description before, but we have had on 5 of My Life another ex-Jehovah.
Yes, I know. I had a listen.
Deborah Francis White.
Correct. Yes. I mean, I'm a huge fan of hers and I got to meet her and so I was very excited, as you can imagine. But to me, that's like the upper echelons of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, doing comedy and improv and everything she does, just so much. Amazing podcast. So, yeah, I'm a huge fan.
And did you meet her because you were a comedian or because you were an ex-Jehovah?
I suppose it was more comedian. That's what it was. I was exploring talking about it on stage. I had found that she had already done that. So that was great. So I listened to, she'd done a series for the BBC, a radio series, and I listened to that and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then I was listening to the Guilty Feminist podcast, and she also does some corporate training. So I was kind of lucky enough to be in a position where I could be like, we need some diversity and inclusion training. And she was able to come and do that in our office. So that was amazing. And you fangirled her? I did. I was embarrassing, I have to say. I mean, yeah, it doesn't happen often. Now, at 5 of My Life, we always start with the film. Yes. And you have chosen Steven Spielberg's 1985 film adaptation of Alice Walker's 1982 Pulitzer Prize winning The Colour Purple. Yes. Tell us about that. Oh, God. That movie for me was the first movie I cried in. So that's what made me pick it. Firstly, I think the film itself is amazing. So it's definitely a good film. You watched it, right? Of course. Yes. Yeah. And did you enjoy it? I've got quite conflicted views about it. Oh. So this is the 5 of your life, not the 5 of my life. All right. We can pick it up. Well, because Spielberg, he did the sunny side of the book. 100%. I mean, I read the book as well. I mean, you honestly, yes. the trouble you put me to the books and the films that I've had to read and watch. But yeah. Yes, but you're right. The book, I think, he skims over it quite a bit. I think we have to remember it was filmed in the 80s, and I don't think they were ready. I think if he did it now, and he regretted it afterwards, I know he did talk about that. But so anyway, for me, at that time, I was brought up in a very strict religious family. And not just that, my parents are Lebanese immigrants to Australia. So we had that kind of cultural, very male-dominated environment. And being a Jehovah's Witness, that whole religion is very set up where men are in power. So I guess what I saw in that film was a feeling that I could relate to, that feeling of almost having a kind of servant type role in that society, both in religious and home life. And, I love Whoopi Goldberg. I mean, she was, that's kind of what drew me to the film, thinking it was going to be a kind of comedy, and there are funny places in it. But the reason I cried in it for the first time, so I was probably in my teens when I was watching it, so sort of maybe 13 or 14. I think all my friends at that time were watching romantic films and crying in those, like there was often a romantic reason to cry in a film. And I just couldn't find it. I couldn't muster anything. I couldn't understand romance. And as it turned out, it was because I was not drawn to men. So when that was presented to me on on film, I was like, I can't ever imagine feeling like that way about a man. But none of that, there were no words for any of that. So it was just a feeling. So this film, I like, when have you ever like sobbed, like proper like sobby in a film?
Oh gosh, yes, I did once a film with Jessica Lange where she had a lobotomy. Oh my god, Francis, it was called. Yeah, awful.
Horrific. Yeah.
Don't, you're triggering me.
Okay, well, that was the idea. But so this film made me sob for the first time. Like I'd watched something like a piece of art and felt that way, and it was when Celie, who was Whoopi Goldberg character, was being separated from her sister. Nettie. And that was very upsetting to me because at that time in my life, the person I was closest to in the world was my sister. And so the idea that I would be separated from her was the thing. And I was like, oh my God, this is... I hadn't even thought about what it would be to be separated from her.
This is Lydia.
Lydia, that's right. In addition to that, there's all these other themes, but that was the big memory for me. But there are all these other themes. So as it turns out, Celie, Whoopi, the main character, she just has this awful life and she sort of weirdly accepted it, that this is what her life was. And when I think of that sort of attitude, that's my mum. Celia at one point says something like, you sort of endure this life because then you go to heaven. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in heaven. They believe some people will go to heaven, but other people will live forever on earth.
Just getting older? Or
no.
Like the Simpsons, they stay the same age?
Yes. Sort of. Actually, I had not thought of that. It is like a cartoon. But what they think is that the world's going to end in an Armageddon, so God will destroy all the people that are not Jehovah's Witnesses, and that the Jehovah's Witnesses that are left would clean up the earth and live forever on earth, right? So that was what I had thought was going to happen at that time. And my mum lives in that state of like, I know this life is awful, but don't worry, because we've got this future life. And when you grow up in that mindset, just watching it on screen and watching what happens to Celie throughout that film in her life is that she suddenly goes, wait a minute, I'm praying to God, nothing's happening, nothing's helping, everything is kind of getting worse. And so over the course of the film, you see her losing her religion and sort of unbelieving what she sort of started to believe. The book does it so much better than the film, and you probably know that, but the way it's described is kind of how I felt. So, that was the big thing. So she was losing her religion. She also falls in love with a woman in the film, also very, very lightly touched on in the film, but the feeling was enough for me to kind of go, oh, you saw her spark up for the first time when she just was so empty. Like I could relate to that, but then I couldn't see a way out of that life. I couldn't see how I could get out of the life that I was in and onto something that would spark me up. So the women in that film all have these different paths that they took.
So how old were you when you saw the film?
I think I was about 13 or 14.
So you were projecting, this is fascinating, your worry about being separated from Lydia, like Celie was from Nettie, but you weren't separated from her there. But what's happened in your life subsequently, I mean, there is a sort of separation. So
correct, yeah.
Amazing, you were sort of prescient.
I suppose, but it's very much laid out for you. So at that time, my eldest brother had left home and left the religion, been kicked out by my dad. Now, he was no longer a Jehovah's Witnesses, and their teaching is that when someone leaves the religion, if they've been baptised, you have to shun them.
And describe what shun means.
You would avoid any contact, but if it was someone like family, you might just really, really limit it to necessary communication. But my dad is just such an extreme person. If my brother was to see my dad, so this is like what I got to see because he left home when I was about 6, so I grew up seeing.
So you lost is Yusuf, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was sad, but I don't think I realised how, because when you're 6, I don't know how much of a connection I had. That kind of came later, but it is sad. It's sad to have I witnessed it. my dad had this conversation with me afterwards to say, look, he's no longer my son, but he's, so you're like, what the hell? That's a weird conversation to have with like when you're that young. But I do remember it. So, yeah, I could foresee what was going to happen. If I was going to leave, I knew that would mean that separation. So it was very laid out.
And is it true that there's, I shouldn't laugh, but it's so shocking that maybe that's my awkward response to it, that when you finally left, your dad didn't talk to you for 20 years.
Yeah.
Wow. I know. In some ways, you've got to admire the commitment.
I know.
He's sticking with it.
He's still sticking with it. It was much, much longer for my eldest brother. So obviously he sort of came in and out. But yeah, he's a very determined man. I mean, the best story to tell you to explain my father is that at the age of, I think he was 31, he felt his teeth were giving him headaches. So he was having trouble with his teeth, and so he went to the dentist. This is in Australia I think it was the 60s, and he said, just take them out.
All of them?
All of them.
Nice.
So in 2 sittings, I think, he had half of his teeth, top and bottom, taken out, and then went back and had the other half taken out. And I think this is the key thing. He doesn't wear dentures. He tried dentures for like a year. He found them irritating. So from his early 30s until now, he has not had a tooth in his head or any dentures, and he eats. I mean, there are some things he can't eat, but it's horrible to watch. I mean, I got used to it, of course, but when other people see it for the first time, it's pretty full on. So his gums are so hardened that he can like bite into an apple.
So when he smiles,
yeah,
you don't get the pearly whites?
No pearly whites, just like an empty hole, like a, I know, but he's got a moustache, so I think that stops it being too obvious, so it kind of covers, we all have a moustache, but he started it, so. Yeah.
So, well, I don't want to speak ill of someone I haven't met, and I'm sure, he is gorgeous, but
he's not really.
Characterful, I would say.
Very, very full of character, yes. Wow. He's a very difficult man, I would say. And that's kind of like the reflection of someone who's like, I don't think this is working, let's rip it out. It's a very symbolic of how he approaches things that he doesn't necessarily agree with. He so believes he's right. And that, in fact, one of the things about leaving a kind of a cult like that is appreciating for the first time that you don't have all the answers. And that's what, part of leaving a religion that is all-encompassing is to just be able to accept, actually, everything I thought was right is not right. And a big, big thing for me was realising I was going to die. Like, I actually have an expiry date. Prior to that, I thought all these things I wanted to do, I could do it in the next life. And when you think like that, it's dangerous.
Yeah.
That's what leads to people willing to sacrifice their lives in wars and terrorism and all these other things, but also just sacrificing their life through procrastination.
Sure.
Because they're thinking, I'll be happy later, I'll put up with this, and then I'll get to that happy place. Once it really occurred to me that wasn't going to happen, that's when I really started to try to live my life. And it's still hard. Like, it's still hard to kind of break out of it. I'm 20 years out more, and there's still trails of it. It's still kind of embedded in there somewhere.
Well, one of the other themes that you've touched on for the film is Spielberg. He basically wrote out the gay theme. I am the bloke who didn't realise that YMCA was a gay song. That's
no, that's all right.
Honestly, but
I didn't know Elton John.
I didn't get that there was any lesbian scene. I just thought they were friends. Right?
Yep.
But obviously in the book,
she goes
you get it. But and Spielberg, as you say, regretted it. Very honest, just talking about it, and say 85. I wanted a PG-13 rating, and a lesbian storyline. Forget it. The change that I have seen in my life. I'm 57. It's astonishing.
How quick?
For the first 3 years of my life in England, it was illegal not to get married, to be homosexual. You could get sent to jail if you said, I've got green eyes or I'm a homosexual. You go right into jail, you go, mate. And
so in your short life, what has happened is enormous. And I think even in my life, when I first came out, so I was like 22, I suppose, to now, I wouldn't have dreamed of coming out at school. No one at school was gay. Like, of course, so many people were gay, and I'm still in contact with, and you sort of know, but you don't know. It's just like a silent, like, acknowledgement. Yes, I get it, but nothing is told or spoken of. And now, people are coming out early. They get, they're taking their partners to the formals and stuff like this. That just would have been unheard of. And that's not that long,
So I think about my God love them, they're both gone now, my parents, but it would be, Auntie Mary's Special.
Yes, yes. And poor Auntie Mary just lives with her best friend for 30 years. I know, they wouldn't go there. I know, and it's a shame for the film, I think, but I think the hint is okay. Like, it hinted enough to me to kind of grasp it. Spielberg did a good job, but he just didn't go there.
The second choice on Find My Life is the book.
Yes.
And you have chosen Dear Fatty by Dawn French in 2008, her autobiography. Tell us about that, Naomi.
Well, I mean, I love Dawn French. I love how she is, her performances. I love what she writes. Like, I read her fiction. She started to get into that. So that's what drew me to the book in the first place. But at that particular period, I went and moved to your home country. So in an effort to find myself, I did the Nettie thing from The Colour Purple, and I just left. So I left when I was 21 and I went to England. I was lucky enough to have two brothers that had already left at that stage. They were living in London and they were like, why don't you come and work it out here? And so that really saved my life, I think. So I went to London, and then I got into reading autobiographies at that point, but I started to read back-to-back comedians' autobiographies. And that's what led me to think maybe I should just try comedy. Like, I knew I could banter and, have a bit of funny exchanges with people, but I did wonder what that was going to be like. And at that point in my work life, I was training. So I was delivering training, and I thought, what a sort of useful skill to have, to be able to control a room, to deal with people. What's it called? Heckling. That's it. Yeah, because you get heckled as a trainer. So it's like, maybe it will help my work, and it will also maybe be fun. So Dawn's book, the way she wrote it is what I liked about it. So when you read autobiographies, often, not always, but there's like a start and, there's like I was born here and that. And I don't give a hoot about much of that information. I'm not someone who's into detail. I really want to hear stories and I want to understand emotions. So when it gets too factual for me, I sort of a little bit glaze over. And when it gets into stories, that's a bit more interesting for me. Well, the way that Dawn writes her, it's a memoir, isn't it, I suppose? It's not an autobiography in that sense. She writes it through writing letters to people in her life. And so you hear her voice and what she wants to say to people that are close to her. That just lit me up. I thought, what a great way. I only realised this after, but the book, The Colour Purple, and Dear Fatty have exactly the same structure, which is they're just letters. So there's no story. You're just figuring it out through how they're writing letters. In The Colour Purple, pretty much all of them are Celie writing letters to God first and then to Nettie. And then Dawn French is just writing letters to all the people in her life. And I just thought it was such a beautiful way to hear how she related to people that she was close to. And she writes a lot of letters to her dad, who died when she was 19. So it was very touching to kind of hear her memory of him and how that all felt for her.
And tell me about your comedy performing.
I'm certainly amateur, but I started off my comedy when I was in the UK, and that's like, there's a lot more opportunity in the UK to do comedy, and UK audiences are like pretty full on.
I love it.
Yeah.
My favourite thing to do is go to the drunk second show. Yeah, brilliant.
That's it. Well, you've done it, haven't you?
Well, only a little bit. I mean, not in any way.
But enough to feel, right?
Yeah.
Like that's, yeah. So I started off doing very self-deprecating comedy, a little bit about being the ex-Jehovah's Witness, but very much coming to terms, I think, with being gay and also just body image issues, which was another thing about Dawn French's book that she talked a little bit about. It's just how she has managed and accepted her body, because she's just pretty much, I mean, she's sort of pretty much who she is, and she's just how she's got her head around loving the body that she has. And so that was a really helpful thing. So I started doing very self-deprecating thing, and then I stopped for a long time, and then I moved to Australia, and in the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years or something, I've been doing Bible-based comedy on stage, and that's been really fun for me. I don't know.
Bible-based comedy?
Yes.
That's a niche. I love it.
It is, right?
Yeah.
So I was thinking it's taken me a long time to really process the religion stuff, and this was a really fun way for me to do it. So what I tend to do is use a Bible on stage, and we'll go through a Bible story together, just like a Bible story, and some of them don't really need much help from me to be hilarious, and some of them are stories where you just get the middle bit and you don't know the beginning or what happens after. You hear about Lot's wife turning around, being turned into a pillar of salt, but you don't hear how they got there, what happened before, you don't hear what happened after. And honestly, it's sort of funny because it's horrific in places. And I'm clearly not reaching for the like love your neighbour sections, and they're good, of course they are. I just don't think we need necessarily a Bible to tell us those things. But I'm picking out the most ridiculous bits, of course. I have Christian friends that are fine with it. It's a little bit irreverent, but not disrespectful of people.
And is it mainly, I mean, full disclosure, I spent 3 years studying the Bible.
There you go, yep.
Is it mainly Old Testament based? Because that, I mean, with the greatest of respect, that's where most of the nutty stuff is.
100%. Yeah. So I would say the majority is Old Testament. But, you know, Jesus was hungry. People don't know that Jesus was hungry one day and he killed a tree because there was no figs on there. That's pretty dramatic. You know, you don't think of Jesus as hangry. So, you know, there are some good fun bits in that side still. And Paul was off his nut. I mean, I haven't really even explored Paul. He is... Actually, I think he was quite detrimental to Christianity. I think if we had just stopped it at Jesus, then... And there are some religions that just pick out Matthew, Mark, Luke and John and go, okay, that's what we're going to believe.
But even then, with the risk of getting spiritual on my audience here, it is the misunderstanding about what they are. They're not supposed to be historical documents. They're written 60, 70 years after, blah, blah, blah. Yep. And to take it... literally, there are 611, I think, direct contradictions in it. You know,
interesting.
Dave left on Tuesday, Dave left on Monday. Well, either it's Tuesday or Monday.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. Like, it's not of course it isn't. I think they're stories. I think if we can understand them to be stories that have morals and, you know, guide us loosely, I think that's fine. I mean, I do feel strongly that I don't want it to show up in my secular world that I live in, because I don't believe in those stories. I think those stories are really interesting. They're, you know, they've got some good, and there's some really horrific things that go on in it. And I just can't imagine now how certain I was that everything in there was true and real and was going to happen. I mean, Jehovah's Witnesses are literalists, so they do believe in it all literally.
If you're using your art to work through a few things, I mean, that can be brilliant. I mean, it can be a wonderful source of content and art and brilliance and humour. Yep. But did you find it always helpful to cathartically say, my dad didn't speak for me for 20 years, I used to be Jehovah's, you know, I was gay, or did you sometimes go home and it like trigger you because I'm telling stories about some of the less happy parts of my life?
For sure. I mean, there's a formula that comedy plus time, pain plus time equals comedy. So you do need a little bit of processing. It is hard to watch someone who's just right in the thick of it because it's really not funny for them then. So for me, I would say I talked about things as and when I felt ready to talk about them. So right at the beginning, I didn't go into the Bible stuff because truly there's a thing in when you're leaving religion called PMO, which is physically in but mentally out. So some people stay attending church but they're losing their faith, but they continue because it's too hard to change things in their life. I was something called POMI, which is what you are, but in a different way, which is I was physically out but sometimes mentally in.
Right.
So I still thought Armageddon was going to come. I just thought I was going to die at Armageddon as a gay woman.
Yes.
That's what I thought.
You're
was
not
gonna
invited.
Happen. Not invited, but actually I was going to kill myself anyway. So I thought, well, I may as well just live my best life until God kills me. At that point, I wasn't ready to have a go at the religion. I felt a bit protective of it. But I was happy to talk about being gay. So that's where my comedy started. And then it went into many years later when I was ready to talk about being an ex-Jehovah's Witness, and I feel fine with that. I had mourned my dad. You know, I knew he wasn't going to speak to me, and I just thought, well, it's like he's dead. And that's how he sees me. And it takes time to mourn, you know, to kind of really go, okay, that person's out of your system. But he wasn't exactly someone I was close to or that I felt connected to. So he wasn't that hard to... I didn't miss him, let's put it that way. I didn't miss him in my life, but I wanted it to be civil for my mum's sake, who did carry on, you know, her relationship with me. So that did make it a bit awkward.
But you are now, which I mean, I shouldn't find it funny because it's a painful story, but you're now chatting to him.
Mate, it is hilarious. It's not painful at all. You know when there was a toilet paper shortage at the beginning of
COVID quarantine, yeah.
We happened to get, where I lived, I happened to get an extra pack. And I knew my mum was running a bit short. So I said to her, my parents, I can come around and drop some of this off to you. And that was the weirdest thing. So I knew he was going to be home, which normally I'd meet up with my mum when my dad wasn't there. But he was going to be home. So obviously, you know, she sort of get to the door and I was just like, oh, you know, you have that sick feeling in your stomach. And I knew she was too, looking really anxious. So I'm at the door and then I come in with the toilet paper and he stands up and he goes, hello. And the last time he said hello to me, I was 21.
Such a remarkable story.
I know. And then he just started as normal. I mean, I will tell you the first line he said to me. I found it hilarious. And I'm not just saying that. It actually is very funny. But I had been in the UK. I'd gone back to the UK to live on a secondment. And so I came in, he said hello, and I said hello. And the first thing he said to me, while he was stood up, he said, I guess you didn't do much exercise while you were in the UK. You know, when you're like, mate, I'm not catching up with my personal trainer after seeing them after 6 weeks holiday. Like, these are the first words you want to say. Okay, mate, okay.
You don't speak to me for 20 years and you go, you've put on weight.
You're body shaming me in your first year. Okay, fine, that's fine. No, it really was funny. I laughed out loud and it sort of, I guess it did break the ice in a way.
Your third choice, on a similar theme to some of the things we've been chatting about already, Naomi, you've chosen a song called God.
Yeah.
I reckon I know where we're going with this one. By Tori Amos, 1994, from her second studio album, Under the Pink.
Yes.
God, sometimes you just don't come through. God, sometimes you just don't come through.
That whole album was released when I got my P's. So I was driving for the first time on my own. I can't even tell you the freedom that I felt in that year. That was like independence. I could get around and I had a bomb of a Datsun 120Y, which I loved. And I drove it around and I had a cassette, which was double-sided. And this would just go on rotation, her whole album on rotation. Now, bearing in mind at that point, I was still in a religion and actually I was really throwing myself into the religion. So I was trying really hard to be good. And then I would just sing along. You know when you sing along to songs, like you know the lyrics, but you don't really know what you're saying? I heard myself singing the lyrics of that song. And the lyrics of that song are just completely eye-opening to me, that she had positioned God as a bit of a useless...
God, sometimes you just don't come through.
Exactly. Just a bit of a useless deity. And I couldn't muster the bravery to think of it like that. And then she says more, like she kind of pushes it further, like maybe you need someone to, like a woman to look after you. But then I saw him as a naughty child. I just thought, what? Oh, yeah, you know, sometimes he's just not great. You know, I pray a lot. I've tried to pray about not being gay. Like, why has he made me gay? And then says it's wrong. I just was like, this is silly. Why do that? Why do that to me? Why let these things happen that are so bad in the world? She allowed me to think of him, that I could judge him as a person. Yes, it really shifted my thinking. I found myself singing it. I knew I shouldn't sing it. And so it felt a bit naughty, which was good. And, you know, that was really the start of me feeling like this isn't right. Something's not right about this. I don't feel comfortable.
Have you ever seen Book of Mormon?
Oh, I love Book of Mormon.
I almost cracked a rib when I think it's Elder Price.
Yeah.
He's enthusiastically singing along.
Yeah.
Hassa Digwe Awobe, whatever.
Yeah.
And then he says, "What does it mean?" And they say something like, "I don't know."
Don't worry about it.
And he goes, "But I've sung that 20 times."
It's so true, though. The things that we accept, you know, we would just accept it and not question it. This relates to, I know, your book that you've written about that kind of work-life balance thing, but I've worked in corporates for many years and I was in HR, right? It's the perfect place to put an ex-cult member. It is. I knew I was really good at my job because I swallowed, you know, I drank the Kool-Aid of an organisation. They have values, well, everything that I was used to. And so it was very easy, and it has been, and this is a very fresh thing for me to think about. It's like, why are you so easily on board with someone who's, you know, telling you their vision for the future, and like I just jump on.
You just swapped your cult.
I did.
It's like me addiction. I swapped chocolate for alcohol.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That realization is hitting me a bit hard, as in I want to follow something. and anything that's institutionalized needs you to believe.
I've got somebody, I won't name or shame, but they work in an organisation and the HR function is called like People Matters or something.
Yep.
And it's automated. It's just perfect. You get
it is,
and they
perfect.
don't even recognise that the thing that's set up to care for the human beings
is not there.
Is a robot.
That is the goal of many HR organisations, to get away from people. Yeah, that's it.
Now you have chosen. You seem a very sunny, delightful, charming, appealing character, but you've chosen as your place on Five of My Life.
Yes.
Waverley Cemetery, full of 86,000 dead people. Explain yourself.
Well, because I really love the idea of death in the context of what we said before. The meaning of that place for me changed, right? So at the very beginning, I spent a long time wishing I was dead, thinking about it a lot, because I just thought it would be a rest. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in necessarily that you go heaven or hell. They believe some people will go to heaven. They don't believe in a hell. So my understanding of what death was my whole life was just non-existence, which is what I was before I was born. So I don't remember that. There was no pain. It was just not being around anymore. And I quite liked that idea. When you're very in that mode, I think I was very depressed. I felt so relieved by that idea that I would fantasize about it.
Did you ever, if you don't mind me asking, did you ever action it or attempt to action it?
No, I never did. No, it was just a thing I played over and over in my head. It was just a fantasy, I think. And going to cemeteries ticks that box. So at that time in my life, I was there thinking, look at all these people that are resting.
The lucky bastards.
It was rest. Yes. Yes, I suppose that's exactly. But then over time, what happened was I find cemeteries very stimulating for the imagination. So I do like reading what's on the tombstones and imagining what their life was like. Or if you see a family and you think, oh God, that person died before that person, I wonder what that was like. And I wonder if they met someone else after their husband died when they were young. I just go through that. I love that sort of story generation. So that is quite enjoyable. And, the view from Waverley Cemetery is just like mad, isn't it?
There are some wonderful poems on the graves in there. And
right.
Yeah, just, it's one of my favourite places as well.
Yeah, cool.
I probably have walked through it because I do a coast walk there.
Yeah.
I mean at least 5,000 times.
Oh
so
my God.
It's a very,
all right.
it's a very special place to me.
Yep.
And I'd like to be laid to rest there.
Would you?
Do you know how much a grave costs in Waverley Cemetery?
I didn't even know they were still selling it.
Well,
I thought they'd stopped.
Take a punt.
I mean, it's not $500, is it?
27 grand.
Shut up.
Yeah, I reckon I'm going to be buried somewhere else.
Oh my God. But is that forever? And then you're just there?
Yeah, I mean, they don't chuck you out after you've rotted, and they chuck you out because your rent's run out.
No, all right, fine. Well, yes, that is a lot. No, thanks.
Now, your fifth choice on Five of My Life, you have, and I, honestly, the work that you put me to, Naomi, I've been YouTubing how to crochet. Because I didn't know the difference in crocheting and knitting, and trust me, I now do.
Okay, good.
Your possession is tiny crochet hearts.
Yes.
Tell us on Five of My Life about that.
Well, my mum has knitted her whole,
Knitted, not crocheting, is different.
And crochet. She did both, you're right.
Yeah.
So she's always been very good with her hands. And my mum had left school when she was quite young and was always a stay-at-home mum for us. So she was very much about making things. And honestly, we had quite a highly anxious household. So I could see that that's how she found some calm, sort of working through her own way of kind of keeping grounded. But I never got into it. I mean, I tried, but I'm just not. I don't have the capability. But then I guess it kind of goes full circle. When I was watching The Colour Purple, I assumed then, and for a large part of the early part of my life, that I would never love someone, right, in a romantic way. I just didn't think that was going to happen because it was so many barriers to that. So I just accepted that I was not going to do that. And I mean, this is all so tacky, but you have to kind of love yourself before you can love somebody else, right?
That's not tacky. That's lovely.
Well, it's true though, right? And it takes a long time, I think, to get to that point, because otherwise you can be in relationships where you're not very giving. So it took me a long time to find someone who I just love and who loves me back in the same way. So when we sort of early on got together, so Alex is my partner, She had crochet. She's a massive knitter and crocheter. Okay.
Is she ex-Jehovah?
No, she's totally normal.
This is brilliant. Did she have like a completely normal childhood?
She had a very, very, and her family are lovely, and a very, very normal childhood. And like she's had to go on a steep learning curve on all these terms and things that I use. But she had crocheted for me as a gift, because we're not big gifts givers to each other. So she had crocheted these small love hearts. I should have brought one. Just made of yarn, and they're as big as my thumb, and she just did loads of them, and so I have sprinkled them throughout my life. So there's one in each of my bags, there's one in my passport case, like, so no matter where I am, I forget that they're there, and then I'll be like, what's that? Oh yeah. And it does that thing of reminding me that I'm loved, but that I love, that I'm able to love in the way that I didn't think was going to happen. I just thought I would have to have this secret that was always going to be this dark, horrible thing that I hated about myself. The whole thing about homophobia being internalized. Oh my God, I was just like, this is an awful part of myself. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to, and I never imagined someone was going to be able to love me for that. It's a nice little sort of surprise reminder, that it's there. And that's quite a meaningful possession.
I mean, what an amazing story. And we've been joking because you're a very entertaining and lovely person to talk to, but this is really sad but inspiring to me. If you were to compare you now living with Alex, and you then driving around listening to Tori Amos thinking, I wish I was dead.
True.
I mean, your life is completely different. It's just wonderful. It's full of love and joy, and you work for the cerebral palsy people. You run a cafe. You do stand-up comedy. You're living a full, vibrant life. You're not scared. You're honouring your own brain. Tell me about. Is Lydia still in?
Lydia's still in. Yes.
Right. So has she got all her teeth?
She has.
Okay.
No, they're
Mum
firmly
still in?
Mum's still in. Dad's still in.
I mean, you presumably don't do family Christmases together with the whole...
Well, they don't celebrate Christmas. That's a whole nother... They don't celebrate Christmas. I celebrated my first birthday when I was 22 when I left.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a religion thing where they just don't celebrate what they consider to be pagan celebrations.
It's still a bit of a schism, but you are still chatting to your dad about putting on weight and toilet paper.
That's right, I know. Yes, so at the moment, because I live in Sydney, Yusuf lives in New Zealand and Ben lives in London, so I'm the nearest to them. Lydia lives in Newcastle, so it means I probably have the most to do with my parents, but ideally they would have me return to the religion, so that's always a hope for them. My sister, I think we, as a sibling unit, we would only really deal with each other if something comes up. If someone's visiting, they might, we might make contact, but it's very minimal contact. But I'm super close to my two brothers, so the three of us are, I would say they were my closest family rather than the whole family unit.
And the family members that are still in, do you graduate away from door knocking, or is that just a part of
Never.
And in your door knocking career, did anyone ever say, "Oh, that's a good I've never thought of it like that. Can I sign up?" I mean,
to me, no, I never converted anyone.
No, because normally you just get doors slammed in your face, don't you? So you used to do 90 hours, so you were useless.
I was so bad. Isn't that so bad?
Could someone stop sending Naomi?
No one picked up on it, but that's a reflection of a lot of things I spend a lot of time doing.
Thank God you were paid on commission. They haven't saved one soul. I've adored this conversation. You're an absolute legend.
Me.
Well, it's not over yet. There is a surprise question. So, have you put on weight recently? No, joking.
Yeah. The answer was yes, but you could ask my dad. He'll tell you. Yeah.
Who would you like to hear on 5 of My Life next?
You've picked a couple already that I would have put forward. So I would have said Deborah Frances-White.
Okay.
But I was going to say Magda
Skubanski.
I would love to hear her. Well, I read her book recently, and I don't know, I've got a soft spot for people that I feel I have stuff in common with. So.
There's potentially a bit of a female lesbian comedian theme here with your Deborah Frances-White.
Well, she's not a lesbian, but everything else. Yeah, I know. Well, that's the people that I can kind of connect with.
Well, we will give her a bell. But Naomi Mourra, where can people see you, by the way?
So I did do a story for Queer Stories. That was good fun. I'm doing a little bit more storytelling, I guess, now. I don't know if it feels more appropriate as I get older. I don't know. So doing comedy a bit more, I'd like to think. But I'm going to try my hand at writing. I might have to talk to you about that a little bit after this.
It would be a pleasure. Naomi, thank you so much for sharing your choices on 5 of My Life.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to The 5 of My Life, presented by me, Nigel Marsh. Our producer is Mandy Coolan. Theme music is thanks to Darcy Thompson and Matt Nicholish. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please share with a friend. And if there's someone you'd like to hear take the challenge, please message us on the 5 of My Life Instagram page. I love hearing from you and appreciate all your suggestions.